markets stimulated by the film and broadcast industry, for instance, and they're all longer-term problems trying to develop technologies. Of course, sometimes technologies are licensed out very rapidly, where they have an immediate market. But really, where we start is to look at the longer-term things, and there's a lot of scope for industry to collaborate with us on that.
Okay. And what sorts of things do you think would be in the pipeline, and anything that your companies might be looking to develop in the future that could reasonably utilise resources at the university here?
So I'll jump in. Criterion Games. I don't know if these microphones work, but okay. For me, we really have kind of two different types of R&D. When we're in a project, we have the R&D pieces that are trying to solve a unique problem for that game. Where I see the work I'm seeing here today is the future focus side of things. For us as a company, it's really hard to dedicate people to look at just ideas that may or may not come to fruition and that could inspire us to do something different with games. And that's what I'm seeing here, is some of those ideas that could just spark off something new and creative, where it's not necessarily about taking a problem from us, but us being inspired by some of the things we're seeing here.
Yeah, I think there's also some interesting new domains, like sort of VR stuff is opening up some new. So, for example, we just recently have been working with like HRTF for like audio positional stuff, for like binaural. In a VR space, when you're looking around, you want the audio to all be positioned, and that's stuff we had no experience of, and so that's been working with Oculus and some academics as well to do that kind of stuff. So it's areas where new stuff opens up and you're suddenly, oh wow, that's maybe possible, or academic research on muscle simulation or physical simulation, all this stuff that you sort of see something and you're like, oh, that's kind of interesting. But then the flip side is all the challenges of, as most people who develop games know, like making a demo is like 10%, and then the rest of it is actually making it shippable. And so that's I think an interesting area to explore with academia, is like, how do you go from just a cool idea that's like, oh, that seems interesting, to actually something that's shippable, and make that a long-term relationship is a challenge.
Sure. So, I think for a lot of the games companies, actually, we do bring in sort of third-party solutions to a lot of our problems. So actually, I think for academia, it's potentially working with the providers of the services to the games companies, because a lot of games companies actually have to be very agile, very nimble, and are looking, I suppose, relatively short-term compared to some of the things you said when we were talking upstairs. You said 5 to 10 year problems. The games industry really doesn't know what's going to happen in 2 years at all, right? So I think that's one of the challenges, I'd say, for partnering with a good number of games companies. It might actually be more the people who are providing middleware or hardware to the games industry, would be my opinion.
Yeah, in Europe for PlayStation, we do have an academic program. I think we've got PlayStation First in a bunch of universities. Some of the stuff shown today is really relevant to Morpheus and sort of head-mounted display technology. So yeah, I'll get our guys to talk to your guys about how maybe we could work together on that tech.
Just take this slightly. So a lot of the technologies we've seen today are about how we create assets and how we use assets in new ways with audio and graphics. I guess an area that I'm really interested in is, are there R&D opportunities in how we as studios make our games and approach the collaboration between studios? We obviously at Criterion, we work with Electronic Arts around the world, so R&D-ing technologies and how we communicate and create games globally could be something really interesting outside of just pure graphics and audio technologies, if that's something other people are interested in.
It's certainly of interest to discuss. I think I probably don't understand where we could contribute in that area and how that would fit with the kind of things we focus on. But it may well be that through further discussion there's areas there where we contribute.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things from my perspective is obviously our engagement from Sony with the universities. We've been very much with the communications department for 5G research, although from Sony point of view we are involved in some of the other research areas. But obviously the challenge really is bringing some of these things together. So I think this afternoon it's been very good from my point of view to hear about lots of work on audio, which of course is important to us at Sony, and also on the video aspect really, because some of the applications or user experiences we're looking at has to build upon several of these research areas. So how to use these research activities within the university to make some quite maybe interesting ideas or prototypes ultimately, which potentially could be demonstrated on this test site at the 5G facility, I think is particularly interesting to me. Yeah.
Before I move on, any questions from the audience? Yes, please.
When we talk about collaboration, there's two things I'd like to say. Firstly is there's a corporate approach to collaboration, which is obviously to do with funding and sponsoring, and then there's a smaller business collaboration where, you know, a small studio like Fireproof or Hello Games or even 22 Cans would have no budget for anything like a corporate would have. And I wonder if you or someone could talk about the distinction between those corporate partners and then the smaller, much smaller company partners who, you know, may be working on some crazy stuff. Because that's the definition of a small studio, is their DNA should be working on crazy stuff, you know, without and much more nimble.
Yes, so there's an opportunity for everybody.
So yes, there is, and there's a whole range of collaborations, from just a discussion and feedback on the work that's going on, right through to large-scale projects. Certainly my experience is some of the best collaborations I've had are with, you know, startup companies or very small companies where they're very focused and you can fit into that, and you've got a direction, and, you know, things move very rapidly. And if the research problems are aligned with that, that can work extremely well in terms of licensing and actually getting things used. At the other end of the spectrum, working with someone like the BBC or one of the big film production houses, you know, it's a completely different story, but you have to, you know, and there's big pipelines you have to fit around and all of that sort of thing. But there's a lot of interesting things and maybe longer term things that you can do there. So there's a whole spectrum of things. And actually, one of the things is in terms of funding, I mean, most of our funding in the end doesn't come directly from the companies. It will come from government agencies and things like that. So it can work, whatever size of company that is. There's obviously an overhead to running the projects, and that needs to be balanced against the gain you get from it. But you know, with the right model there, it can be extremely beneficial from both sides. But the starting point is always a dialogue for those things.
Great. And how did you come up with the ideas for your projects? Is it, you know, someone from industry coming to you saying, we've got this problem, we're going to, you know, we need to work in 5 to 10 years, or, you know, do you guys come up with the problem and then go to industry, bit of both?
Seems to be doing too much talking. So, I mean, idea generation comes, so you can have the academic idea, if you like, that's a kind of spark and something interesting to work on, a bit of inspiration. But ideas often come out of, you know, a dialogue and talking with, I mean, the reason I like to engage with industry is because actually you find out about what are the real problems that would be useful to solve, rather than the problems I can dream up that are maybe never useful, okay, in that sense. So one way that you identify things that are kind of interesting from a research perspective, but also have some potential to be of benefit to industry or the economy or for wider use, is to have these dialogues and to understand where are the bottlenecks in what you do and the limitations of the technology and things like that.
Any questions from the audience?
I've got a question. Thank you for asking that question, Peter, because actually I put myself in the pot of a small company with no money to spend on this. So one of the other things that concerns me, and you might have an answer to this, is potentially intellectual property ownership from research. So how does that work? How can I make sure that there's not some tie?
So the intellectual property will depend a bit on where the funding's coming from for the research and what the nature of the research is. So at one end of the spectrum you have a consultancy type arrangement where usually it's 100% IP to the company. At the other end you have a more explorative PhD project which is funded by government, where you get early access to the IP, but it tends to be the university that owns that. And there's a plethora of things in between. What I would say is one of the first conversations we have when we start collaborating is what are the expectations on both sides from that? And that's something we're very used to dealing with. It's not usually an obstacle unless it's that discussion is delayed until you've actually invented something. It's too late to kind of lock it down. But yeah, usually talking about it early on, there's ways to resolve that. And we're very respectful of, in the end, what we want to do is do good research and high quality research, but we also want to get that used. And one of the ways the industry needs to use that is to be able to have early access to that, to have the IP or control of the IP in some ways. And we, certainly very respectful of that and try to find mechanisms to make that work.
Yeah, just one comment on that. Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, I think in my experience, I'm sorry, we've engaged with a number of universities on various projects, sometimes collaborative and sometimes bilateral. And my experience sitting on IP is we've always, I think that's good advice, I think we've always been able to come up with a good formula. Obviously more challenging when you've got lots of collaborators on a project, but very often, from a university point of view, maybe after a certain period of time, once obviously publish the work, and you can come up with a formula that allows to some kind of IP ownership transfer, whatever, but still allows that ability to publish the work and work with others as well. So in practice, I think dealing with it early on, I think is good advice. Issue it early on, and I think it's rarely been a big issue. Certainly working with the European universities anyway.
Yes, question at the back.
It's not so much a question, it's a point that the government has put in place a number of opportunities through, for example, innovation vouchers, R&D tax credit, where you get cash back for loss-making SMEs, patent box, and other structures to try and assist very small companies get involved in R&D. And the university has a technology transfer office, which I believe, there's people here, they may be able to engage with the university effectively at the level that you want, rather than at this very high level of some of the things we've heard this afternoon. I thought I'd just say that for information if you're interested. Thank you.
Great, so we're involved in some of that, in advising our clients on some of those issues as well. So yeah, very happy to talk about them afterwards if anyone has an interest. So I guess my last question, I'm keen to get everyone started on the beers, is whether you guys have any ideas for useful collaborations with universities. Sorry to put you on the spot.
I guess the question would be how do you start that relationship? I mean, I think it's a great event, and I completely agree with Peter that I moved to Guildford about a year ago. I was kind of surprised that there wasn't more sort of community between universities and between the studios. So if you are thinking, if you are working on a tough problem, if you're thinking about some interesting ideas, like how would you sort of do you just knock on the door and say, I've got this real problem with animation compression. Is there someone who can help me figure it out? Is that literally the just call up and go from there? How do we get the ball rolling? I guess.
So my experience in all the collaborations I've been involved in is someone coming and asking the question, or me going talking with someone and finding common points where there's interesting problems to work on. So that to me is always the starting point. Look for the people who've spoken today, or look on the web pages, things like that, or get in touch with someone in the area, and they'll probably be able to point you in the right direction. That's often how an initial contact will start, and then you can see whether is there expertise in that area that's useful, and follow that through. I mean, certainly following up from today, if there's things that are of interest, then a good thing to do is to arrange a couple of hours to come along and talk in a bit more detail about the particular things you're working on, where the areas of interest are. And most likely we won't be able to solve all of the problems, but there may be 2 or 3 things in there that could be fruitful to work on, or find ways to work on, yeah.
Could I just add a comment to that? We also have, because it's recognised as I head business development at our research enterprise supporting the local university, and this is a recognised issue. Sometimes it's very hard from the outside to navigate your way in. Obviously this evening connects you very much into Adrian's team and other colleagues here, but if you are stuck on other areas and want to find your way in, we do have a business development team and a very simple business development at surrey.pc.uk, and if you fire something into that, and you can circulate that to listing managers, we can also help navigate you to the right place. So there are other routes in, but obviously tonight is about getting them directly connected with the right people, which is superb, because it is difficult to find your way around sometimes.
Thinking about that from a different angle, when we're at studios, we can be so deep and heads down in making the games. I'd be really interested in how we can integrate more university people, whether it's through internships or other things, in the studio to help us identify problems that we might not be able to see ourselves or have the time to kind of look at. I think that'd be something we'd be really interested in involving more.
So certainly at both undergraduate and PhD level, we're very keen on internships. All our undergraduate programs pretty much run placement years and things like that. So those things are really good. You know, to be able to pull someone out of a PhD program to come for a couple of months to work on something is a really good way of exchanging. And it's great for the PhD student as well to get some real world experience kind of outside of the university. So that kind of thing, either at undergraduate level, you know, summer thing, kind of internships and that, or kind of longer term things. Also, you know, the placement schemes that we run are a great route for graduates who think they want to go into an industry. You know, it's a great kind of tester from both sides, if you like. And you know, if it's successful, it often turns into a longer term relationship.
So, one of the things I was going to say, in answer to your question, Jacqueline, I do have an idea, but I'm definitely not going to say it out loud in front of a room full of people. Unfortunately for your question, but there you go. As a lawyer, you'll understand that. On the sort of thing we talked about collaboration, I mean, we were chatting away upstairs, and I think for me, you know, Guildford is a fantastic hub, really strong hub for games development, and I think that it would be great to see Surrey be, and I've mentioned it as coined the Abate of the South, you know, but we need to collaborate on that, and if we can do that, then more of the research activities that you'd like to see happening will happen. But also we can get better students that we need more of. We certainly need more computer science students from the UK come out of perhaps Surrey and into our industry, as well as art and design and everything else as well. So I think there's some excellent ways that we can collaborate. And obviously doing this is a great start, and you know, we should do more of these type of things, basically.
Yeah, over in Europe, we've always had interns and placement students. I got my job 17 years ago because my friend at uni was on a placement. So we do that. We've always had interns or placements or graduates come in to get an experience in the industry. More recently, we've started to, within the R&D group, have sort of postgraduate people come in to do 1 or 2 years research with us in a certain area. I think we've got a few more joining in the next few months. So definitely worth you guys talking to us or any other university that's interested, and we can see if there's any way to collaborate.
Great, thanks everyone, and thank you to our lovely panellists. And enjoy the beer and the bottle.